Every noise is a clue to the events which took place during the night. A few miles away, a pack of hyenas are preparing to make a kill. Not that they ever leave much for vultures. A pack of hyenas can consume an entire carcass at one sitting, including the bones. Skillful hunters at night, they too become scavengers at dawn. As the air warms, the first gentle breezes begin, and if the birds detect the chance of a meal, they may cover some distance by labored, flapping flight, but this is energy-consuming and exhausting. On the whole, most vultures prefer to wait for the ground to heat up properly before attempting to get airborne. Then they are able to take off and soar into the air, circling on broad wings. In flight, a vulture tucks its long neck into an S-bend below the shoulders, so that the head is low and in a position to scan the ground below. In the downward swoop, a vulture can reach 55 miles an hour. It's not unusual to see 5 or sometimes even 6 species all feeding on one carcass. These are lappet-faced vultures, so called because of the vivid pink skin folds or lappets covering their heads and necks. The smaller, white-headed vulture is distinguished by the brilliant white, rather square head and its blue and red beak. Ruppel's griffon sports an ivory-white upper mandible, unlike the white-backed vulture whose beak is completely black. The hen-like hooded vulture, capped with white down like a bewigged judge, pecks at unwanted scraps among the feet of the larger vultures, with its fine, pincer-like beak. It often stays at a carcass long after the other birds have departed, picking up the scraps. Seeing a great gathering on a carcass like this, one can't help wondering how so many different species avoid competition and manage to survive on the same food, a corpse. The white-backed vultures are by far the most numerous on the African plains. They seem to come from nowhere, sensing death with an uncanny sixth sense. A vulture can spot a carcass from a height of 9,000 feet in the air. Their visual acuity is 3 times better than our own. They often rely on following other vultures, and less on searching for themselves. Cheetahs are somewhat nervous predators. Being solitary hunters of the open plains, they usually cannot conceal their kill, nor can they devour it at one sitting. Only a cheetah will abandon a carcass while there is still a large amount of meat on it. They are often deprived of their kill by lions, but a daunting number of vultures can force them to surrender a carcass too. The birds edge closer. Vultures may be quite a match in a mob, but they are individual cowards. By now, the cheetahs have fed reasonably well, but the press of vultures makes them uneasy, and they begin to move off. The horde is upon the carcass as one. Each bird seems to be simultaneously shrieking, cackling, fighting, and feeding. In fact, vultures seldom obtain their food from predators in this way. Most predators are extremely efficient feeders, leaving little behind for others to scavenge. Lions often guard a kill for several days until they've finished feeding. Leopards hide their prey in the branches of trees, well out of the reach of scavengers. As the morning lengthens, the sun beats down on the ground, creating rising columns of warm air, thermals. Of course, these are normally invisible, but sometimes a thermal sucks up a vortex of whirling dust, a giveaway sign for the vultures. The best hours for thermaling are between 10 and 4. As soon as one vulture is climbing successfully, it's quickly joined by others, until they're all circling around a common axis. On a hot day, it only takes about 10 minutes for a vulture to climb to over 9,000 feet. Once there, it can soar effortlessly for hours at a time. advantages of flight are obvious. Vultures can scan a much wider expanse of the plains from their vantage point and watch the actions of vultures a great distance away. Once a carcass has been spotted, they can glide down long before any earthbound carnivore can get there. Often lions and hyenas watch to see where vultures come down as an indicator of possible food. But in a great many cases, no mammalian scavengers ever arrive, and the vultures are left in peace. If peace is the right word. The vultures are driven by hunger, and this creates its own temporary hierarchy. The hungriest will fight their way to the front, while those that are nearly satiated will allow themselves to be driven back. The birds seem almost to shovel the slippery food down their throats. Their heavy beaks are designed for pulling, and the flexible, feather-free neck allows them to poke their heads right inside to pull out soft tissues. In a direct attack, a vulture jumps upon his rival, striking, gripping, and pushing with his feet, like a playground bully. Disputes often break out over small scraps. These squabbles appear vicious at times, but little harm is done, as most battles are largely ritualized. Lost on the fringes of the melee, the small hooded vulture pursues its quiet search for scraps of food. None of the larger birds would be able to exist on these pickings. It is the least specialized of the vultures, with a weak bill and talons, but it is an opportunist, prepared to stoop to small lizards, beetles, and even winged termites as they emerge from the mound to found a new colony. Immature birds closely resemble adults, but the down on the back of the neck is brown instead of white. The bare facial skin of the young birds also tends to be much paler than that of the adults. In some parts of Africa, the hooded has formed a close link with man, and the birds are welcome at village abattoirs and rubbish heaps, where they perform a useful disposal service. The Egyptian vultures circling here are similar to the hooded in many ways. They're just as small and unspecialized, but they breed in semi-arid rocky regions, while the hooded prefers the acacia savannas. So they do not often compete. Though similar in size to the hooded, the Egyptian vulture has much more powerful feet. It also has the distinction of being one of the few species on Earth that uses a tool to obtain food, in this case, to open up ostrich eggs. It picks up small stones and hurls them at the tough shell. It may take quite a few throws before it's able to peck its way through to the nutritious yolk inside. This skill seems to be confined to a few local populations. The vultures learn the technique from each other. It certainly isn't innate behavior. This immature bird hasn't quite got the hang of it yet. It doesn't matter where you throw the stone, as long as you throw it. But with a little practice, it will soon be as successful as its parents. This remarkable adaptability is one among many factors which has enabled vultures to become the supreme scavengers of the African plains. The white-headed vulture is able to soar on the weakest of thermals. It's often out soon after dawn, and as a result is the first to find the remains of animals which have died during the night. It regularly patrols a hunting territory which it knows intimately, and avoids competition with the squabbling griffins by seeking out small carcasses. The white-headed always tries to feed alone, but sometimes it discovers a large carcass which is attractive to other vultures, such as the lappet-faced. Both appear to feed in similar ways, but the lappet-faced is not such a loner. It feeds with the crowd. In fact, it is often the most aggressive bird, and will charge among a tight knot of griffins to win its place at the carcass. where it tears at coarse sinews and skin. Unlike the griffins and white-backed vultures, it never inserts its neck inside. The sharp beak and powerful muscles make it more capable than others of breaching the tough hide of an untouched carcass. Though weak compared to an eagle's talons, the lappet's claws may well be powerful enough to kill small or sick animals with the full weight of the bird behind them. Takeoff is often hard for a vulture weighed down after feeding, especially if it has gorged itself on 3 to 4 pounds of food, enough not only for itself, but for its young too. Lappet-faced vultures are strictly monogamous. Both birds build the nest out of branches in the top of an acacia tree. For just under 2 months they have shared the arduous duty of incubating the single egg, which was laid in June. Now they take turns to feed the 2-month-old chick. Unlike other birds of prey, vultures are ill-adapted for carrying food in their talons. Instead, they transport half-digested food back to the nest in their crops and feed the young by regurgitation. The adult brings a mixture of meat, skin, and bone fragments. The bone is a vital source of calcium for the growing chick. The parents stand guard round the clock during the first weeks of the chick's life, while it is small and vulnerable. Vultures have always impressed man by the attention they lavish on their young. But by now the chick's appetite is so voracious that both parents have to go foraging. For as long as 18 weeks the chick remains a prisoner of the nest, most of that time fully exposed to whatever the elements will bring. It finds the fierce heat of the midday quite stressful, and pants heavily to lose heat. Its only water intake comes from its food. The adult soars over the plain on wings some 9 feet from tip to tip. Like the white-headed, it patrols a fixed foraging area. Both vultures retain eagle-like characteristics, and it's now, when the birds have a hungry chick to feed, that they may kill small or sick animals. Seeing a group of vultures already gathered on the ground, the lappet-faced glides in to investigate, using its legs and tail as air brakes, allowing it to alight with great precision. Upon touchdown, it assumes a self-assertive posture and approaches with measured gait, pivoting from side to side in an exaggerated manner and showing off in front of the whole flock. The lappet-faced vultures are all known individually to each other, and when 2 birds meet, they may greet each other with a soothing gesture of mutual head-turning. Age counts in vulture society, and if an adult meets an immature bird, the outcome will invariably be to the advantage of the adult, which approaches with a ritualized threatening march, lowering its head and displaying its stretched feet in a macabre goose step. It's believed that adults are accorded first access to food, because it's more than likely that they will have a chick to feed back at the nest. The lappet-faced can also change the color of its facial skin, flushing a fiery red when excited. The intensity of color is a status symbol. Adult birds tend to flush a deeper red than immature birds. After socializing, the gorged bird has to get a fair speed up before soaring into the air on powerful wing beats. By now, the 3-month-old chick is able to feed itself on food left for it by its parents. The nest floor is covered by regurgitated pellets of hair and bone. Vultures often have a communal daytime loafing area where they drink and bathe. Contrary to popular belief, vultures are clean birds, and wash any gore from their plumage regularly. First they dunk the neck, then each wing, and finally the tail. It is as important for vultures to maintain their flight feathers as for any other bird. They have to wait for their feathers to dry off completely before taking to the air once more. In an emergency, they can actually take off while still wet, but it takes a great effort to do so. Flight is high on the agenda of the 4-month-old chick. It spends a lot of time standing on the nest and spreading its wings, exercising its muscles and experiencing the lift generated by the wind. At first, the bird is wary of rising too far above the floor of the nest. Inexperienced at judging the strength of the wind, the bird bounces into the air again and is suddenly swept backwards. Remaining airborne but lacking the strength and skill to fly against the fierce wind, it has to fight every inch to regain the nest. In the turbulence behind the nest, it loses control and falls short, becoming entangled in the branches covered by long protective thorns. Somehow it manages to struggle free and reach the safety of its nest. Undaunted by the crash landing, it succeeds in making a longer flight, settling in another tree a few yards away. Tired from the exertion, it rests, preparing for another battle against the wind on the return journey, and casts a longing eye at the nest which looks so inviting, yet so far away. Determined to succeed this time, it frantically beats its wings. And already experience pays off. Within a couple of weeks, it will have nearly the same mastery of the air as its parents. The heavy-bodied Rupel's griffons rely entirely on low-energy gliding flight, as they are too heavy to sustain flapping flight for long periods. Both Rupels and white-backed vultures have always lived successfully among the ungulate herds, and the two groups probably evolved alongside each other. It's estimated that mammalian predators only account for as little as a quarter of the deaths among the herds on the plains below. Most casualties among the migratory herds die from malnutrition and disease, especially in the dry season. During this period, the nutritious value of the grass falls. The wildebeest move on to catch the first flush of green grass that will follow rain in the north, but many perish. For the vultures, this period of want is one of plenty. Rupel's griffons can maintain a steady 35 miles per hour and cover vast distances to reach the herds by leapfrogging from thermal to thermal. Their mobility is their strength, allowing them to specialize completely on animals which fall by the wayside. These vultures are not merely cleaning up after predators, as is commonly thought. In fact, they are exploiting a resource which few mammalian carnivores can ever hope to reach. Lions and hyenas maintain local feeding territories and cannot follow the herds in this way. Unlike the other vultures, Rupels nest communally on steep cliffs. These vertical weathered faces conceal numerous nesting ledges, and the prevailing wind creates a continuous updraft along the cliff edge. A breeding pair of Rupel's griffons have a hard job ahead of them to provide sufficient food for the growing chick, over 3 pounds of meat a day. They take turns to leave the gorge early, to cover the large distances necessary to reach the migratory herds and return to the nest. This terrain allows the heavy-bodied birds to soar and glide on the updrafts, even in cloudy conditions when ground thermals are poor. In this way, they are independent of thermals and can be airborne at first light. The feathers on the wingtips are spread like fingers to smooth out the airflow and prevent the bird from stalling at slow speeds. These fingers twist in flight like small propellers, giving the bird extra speed. On the ground, vultures may well be the dustmen of the plains, but in the air they celebrate an enviable grace and mastery of flight.